federal government exists to protect and to preserve the safety of the country as a whole. It exists to govern the country as a whole. It does not govern the entire populace directly. The separation of powers defined in Article 6 of the Constitution define clearly and specifically the few powers which the federal government directly has on the states. Otherwise, the federal government has the authority over how the state governments are to enact policies. The federal government should not and does not enact policies onto the states directly, with a few specific exceptions which are explicitly defined by the Constitution. In addition to the Constitution confirming the state powers in Article 6, it is the principle of subsidiarity, for the states know better than the federal government what is best for their states. And it is true in government, someone always falls. However, the state governments are overseen by the federal level so that they have the necessary protection to recuperate and recover if an individual were to fault in the government system, and they would be able to recover from that if such a thing would happen and to keep the flow of government smoothly going. In addition, the 10th Amendment ratifies the separation between state and federal laws and gives that power for the states to make their own laws. If the states merely had what is left over after the federal government, for example, if the federal government were to specifically make a policy which all the states must abide by and only allow the states to make a few modifications and be specific about it, that only leaves a few abilities, what is left over, as the restrictions in such a case may be so tight that it renders the state governments useless, which then thereby provides too much power to the federal government. For example, in international affairs, it is the responsibility of the federal government, as they understand better than the states with international situations. So it is their duty to deal with international affairs. However, in affairs in a state, it is of the duty of the state, as they understand better than the federal government what is happening in their states. Therefore, they understand what the states understand what is best for them and what laws should and should not be enacted in their states.
Federalism is defined as citizens being represented by both national and state governments, which both have clearly defined powers. The federal government has the power to prevent the states from doing dumb things and making dumb laws. It should retain the most power because it can make the laws necessary for the nation, states included, to thrive as a whole. The states can then go and make any necessary laws to keep their own states safe. Amendment 10 states that the powers not delegated to the United States by the Constitution, nor prohibited by the states, are reserved to the states respectively, or to the people, meaning that once the federal government is done making the crucial laws, the states can come in and make whatever laws they feel are necessary within the limitations of the Constitution to best help their particular state thrive. Then, the necessary and proper clause comes in and says some other stuff. This clause gives Congress the right to make all laws which shall be necessary and proper for carrying into execution the foregoing powers and all other powers vested in the government of the United States. This means that the government has the power to make the necessary and proper laws for carrying into execution the foregoing powers as stated, and all other powers vested in the government of the United States. They can make the laws that are necessary. So the government can make the majority of the laws necessary, and thus have the majority of the power, and then the states can fill in whatever they see fit. Continuing on, a great example of this is when the federal government decides to, just make a law, for example, like marijuana. They're like, okay, this is illegal, but states, it's okay if you want to experiment with it. We could still come over and be like, hey, this ain't okay anymore. You guys got to close all of your little things that are going on. So that's a great example, I guess. Continuing on again, the federal government just they do the good things. They have all the power. Well, not all the power. If they have the majority of the power, they can ensure the majority of people's safeguards.
The problem with the government having all the power would obviously defeat the purpose as stated in the separation of powers in the Constitution. It would defeat that purpose as it would make the federal government all too powerful. And a constitution is founded on avoiding a strong central government. And if the states were to only, as you say, fill in the blanks, that would not provide for much room of government for them. And if they didn't have enough power, that would render the state governments useless and pointless. Furthermore, if the states did not have any power to make laws for their own states, that leaves it up to the government of the federal government. And the federal government still does not know as well for the states what is right for them, as the states know what is right for their own state government. The state government knows what's right for their state.
Just because the states are closer to the people doesn't mean that they know what is best for the nation. The Constitution does state that the states have the power to create laws, but that doesn't mean that the federal government making the majority of laws is bad. The federal government should make the majority of laws because it can see the big picture. It knows every aspect of what goes on in the nation and appropriately responds to what is happening. Just like we heard in Father's homily today, if you take 2 pages out of Lord of the Rings, something might seem bad. So if you just take, the state's perspective, it might seem bad. But the government, as a whole, they can see the whole picture. So they know what's good, and once it all plays out in the end, it'll be good.
Government sees a bigger picture. That is true. States can see a picture in a more comprehensive way as they know more of what is happening in their state. The Constitution explicitly gives states the right to make laws, not to merely fill them in the blanks. If the government made the majority of the laws and the states were only to fill in the blanks, that would be leaving them without their constitutional right to fill in the blanks. So yeah, basically, if they didn't fill in the blanks, they wouldn't have their constitutional right, and they would be left with nothing. Get it? Right? Constitutional right, left with, yeah. Oh, okay. Where was I? My joke threw me off. and your analogy from Father's homily fails, as God literally sees everything. The government does not see everything. In fact, the states see more of what happens in their own state than the government does. For example, it may be taken out of context the way the government sees it. For example, if they get their information from the press, and the press is very notorious for distorting the truth, the state governments have a more accurate lens to see what is happening around them.
I never said that the government would have all the power. Simply more power than the states to ensure the states don't go and make some stupid law that will lead the rest of the nation into chaos. For example, if the federal government had made a law that had the power and stated that abortion was illegal, then we wouldn't have this issue of states choosing for themselves if abortion should be illegal or not. And none of these shenanigans would be going on. So, quite simply, the federal government just needs to have more power so that they can make the hard calls, or not so hard calls really, I guess, because it's a no-brainer that abortion shouldn't be legal because it's like killing a baby. Anyway, but yeah. So, yeah, if the federal government had more power, then we wouldn't have to deal with these trifling matters such as these, I rest my case.